Henry Ford's assembly line revolutionized the automobile industry, the manufacturing business, and the way factories would operate forever. The assembly line got its start in 1913, with it and its workers producing Henry Ford's Model Ts. The Model T was the first car that was mass-produced and priced low enough for public use. Previously, only the wealthy had owned cars, but now with a Model T only costing about $290, the Model T was in the price range of any average American. Because of mass production and low prices of his Model Ts, Henry Ford was able to have large room for profit, which ran right back into his factory and his workers. Henry Ford was the first person to give a factory worker a livable wage. He paid his workers $5 a day instead of the low wages most other people got at the time.
By 1913, Henry Ford had 13,000 employees building Model T Fords at his Highland Park plant. But Ford was still searching for efficiencies. He broke their tasks down into the smallest components. Instead of building a complete sub-assembly themselves, a worker sat at a bench, performed one task, and passed a part down to the next person. This cut the time it took to assemble some parts, like magnetos, in half. But some people were slower than others, and the pace kept fluctuating. He combined his experiments with moving parts and job specialization, and came up with the mechanized moving assembly line. Finally, assembly was done at a steady pace. He redesigned the complete manufacturing process and made it as efficient as possible. No wasted motion. He installed thousands of single-purpose machines. Many he devised himself to speed up assembly. In essence, the factory became one giant machine. The machines and workers were arranged sequentially. The tools and parts were within easy reach. Everything was synchronized. As one part was put on, another was ready. The line kept moving. It was a relentless pace, but Ford's costs began to drop substantially. In some cases, the moving assembly line reduced by 80 to 90% the amount of labor it took to perform a task. Passing those savings on throughout the manufacturing process began to make believers out of Ford's critics.
Well, mass production drove down the cost of producing an automobile dramatically. You can think of all of the developments that have come since, automation and robotics and what is now called lean production, and none of them had nearly as much influence on cost cutting.
As his costs plunged, he lowered his price from $850 to $490 a car. By 1914, he was selling almost 250,000 Model Ts a year. But his system, inspired by the mechanized disassembly lines that the meat packers were using, was taking its toll on the employees.
Building the assembly line was by no means an exciting job. Oftentimes, the workers did the same monotonous job day after day. Even though the jobs were boring, it didn't mean they were useless. Due to the assembly line and the workers adding their part and sending it down the line to the next station, it cut the time and the price to make an automobile. What used to take 12 hours to make now only took 1 hour and 33 minutes. With the new production rate, the Ford Motor Company was producing nearly 1,000 cars a day. Henry Ford didn't change the automobile industry by just adding an assembly line. He also came up with the idea of interchangeable parts. These were parts of the car that were made in the factory but never put on the car itself. Instead, they were shipped out to stores separately, and if something went wrong with a certain Model T, then the owner could go to the store and pick up the spare part and put it on themselves. This eliminated the previous way of having to order the part special from the factory or trying to find the part on a separate car. The assembly line wasn't only used for cars, though. Over time, the assembly line evolved to make any type of manufactured good. During World War II, the assembly line helped mass produce anything from bullets to guns, but the big thing was airplanes. From small fighters to the massive bombers, the assembly line helped ensure that the Allies would win the war. Henry Ford's perfection of the assembly line changed life and business in the early 1900s. By having workers do the same task over and over, it eliminated the need for skillful workers. Also, with his higher wages, he was able to make sure his workers had a livable paycheck. Henry Ford made it his responsibility to make sure that every American had access to an automobile, even if they had a low-wage factory job. Although Henry Ford is long gone, his business practices still live on in the car industry and in every type of manufacturing around the world.